Permission for Pleasure speaker series, where we empower women and men to create liberated fempires anchored in leadership harmony in service of your highest mind, body, and soul wellness. I am your host, Amy Jones, and in today's episode, we will be connecting with David Gilks, a psychophysiologist. David is a pioneer in the field of mind-body connection, kinetics, and he has found a simple three-step approach that powerfully moves you into space of having it all. So today we're going to talk with David about the secret of true spiritual integration and how this is practical magic that creates deeper connections. We're really grateful for having you here today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, absolutely. No, I love these conversations, so I couldn't be happier.
Awesome. So we're going to talk for 30 minutes or so. We're going to share with our listeners your empowering personal journey of mind, body, soul wellness anchored in leadership harmony. And so as we get going, I would love to hear what has inspired you to share your story with your world.
Well, there was I think there's a bit of a transition where if you've had a challenging say existence, which if you've been on planet Earth, chances are you've had numerous challenges, and I was caught up in this shaming effect where I just thought everything that I experienced wasn't worth to be spoken about. In fact, it was something to be hidden, because I thought I had to show up as this bright shiny apple in the world to be accepted. And I was really terrified that people would look, they would look below the surface and they'd see these parts of me that I thought were that were not worth bringing up. I thought people would never understand. And it wasn't until I actually got into, when I was 28, when I actually stepped back into reality, as it were, and I started studying, as I realized that there isn't a person I've ever spoken with that if you scratch below the surface just a little bit, you'll see there's inherently some incredible challenges they've gone through. And some people will evolve beyond it and become extraordinary. Some people will get stuck, and some people will actually take themselves right out of the universe and so I became really curious, because it wasn't self-evident that there was only one way to react to a challenging past.
Yeah. And
Right.
you're right. We all have a past, and we all get to choose how we desire to live. And I mean, that's really the basis of my business, which is live with intention. And you get to choose your intention. And I love it. And it's inspirational when you get to basically turn lemons into lemonade, because we all have our own version of lemons. And so I'd love to hear more. What are some of the obstacles that you have faced throughout your life, the lemons, on your path to your highest
Oh,
success?
it's so crazy. It's I grew up in a family. There was 8 of us in one house. I'm from a family of 11. Some of the step sibling or half siblings, but it wasn't it wasn't a lot of fun. We grew up without my father around in the beginning, and our parents were quite young when they got married. So father was out working in different parts of Eastern Canada, and our mother at the time was letting our 11-year-old brother, who's the eldest, look after us, and she would disappear for days at a time. And it wasn't, I mean, I guess as an adult looking on, you think that was horrific, but we were having fun. I mean, we didn't have
your generation too.
yeah. Well, it's true, right?
Yeah.
And we were fine. I mean, we survived. We survived all of it, despite parental guidance. And but it's my parents were just unhappy people. I thought my mother was quite unhappy, and of course she has a history that once you understand it, you kind of it doesn't justify, but it does explain how she was showing up. And my father was a very big man, 6'5", very strong man, very short temper, and so kind of lived in fear. So there wasn't this a place that we really felt comfortable. And I started running away from home at the age of 8, and eventually over the years, I made it out for almost 2 years. I lived out the street, and I made my way. And I thought it was a grand adventure. I was on this big adventure, crawling out to the window at night when everybody was sleeping with my backpack, And it felt better and safer and more predictable to be in the world than it did to be at home. And so it was it was you know the fact that I actually survived. I know a lot of kids who live on the street. Not everybody actually survives that space, and the fact that I survived it and gracefully. I've thought about a lot over the years and saying there's a reason why I managed to, and this was in Vancouver and Delta and Surrey. So not a very hospitable place, on the street at times. But I made it through, and because I was in and out of jail, just for silly things. And then finally, later on in my teens, I got sent to a local prison here, just as the judge was deciding that I was heading down a really seriously wrong path, and he wanted to give me an idea of what real loss of freedom looked like.
Mhm.
And so I got sent to Brandon Lake Prison here with one of my cohorts, and just to give us a taste of it, and that spiraled me. So after I left there, I spiraled out. I was in Banff, Alberta for 5 years. So that was in the 80s. So we were freebasing cocaine, and just that's what the 80s were. It was insane. And what saved my life, interesting enough, which is what actually brought me into the conversation today, is that I had an opportunity to move to the south of Portugal in this little fishing village. Where it didn't have any of the hype of North America, didn't have any of the insanity. It certainly had its own. We all have our own problems, no matter where you go. But it cut that insane lifestyle. It cut it down by 2/3. And now I'm in this sleepy little village around a beautiful, let's say, a beautiful ancient culture, and the rhythm of the culture, and the rituals of their life, and the family, and the cohesiveness. It's exactly what I needed. I needed to feel like I was home. And I spent 3 years in a little village called Praia de Luz in the Algarve, and moving there, I'm pretty sure it saved my life. I would have been the addiction would have gotten me for sure. I was just I'm lucky that I'm not really I don't have an addictive personality per se,
Mhm.
but I walked a fine line for a lot of years, and so the 3 years decompressed me away from my insanity. So but I was sitting on the beach, and this sounds kind of wild and even made up, but I swear to God, it's I'm sitting on the beach. I'm 28 years old, grade 10 education, no money in the bank, but on the go since I was 13. And I had this feeling, and a voice, but not a voice. It's almost like I don't know. It's this weird idea where my brain was saying, because you've lived for nothing, you stood for nothing. When you disappear, nobody will notice and nobody will care, because there's nothing about your life that even made a footprint in the universe. And it was a bit of I wouldn't say terrifying, but a very I felt exceptionally hollow to realize that I've been I was charismatic. I was let's say a decent enough looking young guy, and I was charismatic, so I could manipulate and lie and use, and just to get my way through life. And that's what I had done for years, because that's how I knew how to function. And so that prompted a phone call to my father, who I was estranged from. And so he had a natural health center. He had been working in the natural health industry for years. He had his own path he was on. And he said, I can't pay you, but I can give you room and board if you want to study natural health care. So at 28, after my 15-year journey, I moved back home with my parents, went on welfare, and began rebuilding my life.
Very humbling.
Yeah. Whew. Yeah. Yeah. Welfare was the hardest thing moving back with my parents after being on the go for so many years. And then going to the welfare office and whatever I thought that meant. But it was, and that changed everything. And I did basically a 6-month detox, because, I had a lot of garbage in my system.
Mm.
But once my brain cleared and my emotions settled and my health came up, I realized that I had this really abstract mind, and I can I can understand things and I thought having a grade 10 education was my limiting factor. But it opened up a whole door, because I wasn't taught what I had to think. And so everything was open to me. And so I read everything. I worked 8 to 10 hours a day, and I read 4 hours every night. I did that for 3.5 years. And that just springboarded me into 30 years of study and reading and just insanely curious to the exact vigor I was trying to destroy my life on one end, the exact polar opposite energy to recreating and building and exploring this extraordinary life that I live now.
Like, so many things are coming up when you're talking. I've made notes so I don't forget. And it's like I see this theme that so many people, it's like almost like an implosion where we come back to like a 0 point because we realize we've been allowing ourselves to be externally led
Right.
by people, places, and things our entire life unknowingly, because that's just what it is and how it is. And there's so much resistance or disturbance or noise with that because it's not in authentic alignment with your pureness. And connecting back into your self leadership. Of course, you're reading 4 hours a day because you're allowing yourself to make your own decisions and do what you want that is bringing you joy and pleasure, not somebody else. And um, I'd love for you to, what does power mean to you? I wrote that down while you were talking.
Right.
I want you to tell me what power means to you then and now.
Well, it's interesting because power, as soon as you said that, power to me meant it automatically the word powerless um, was the first word that came up because that's what I felt for most of my life, that I had no control, right? And there's and living on the street, by the way, and there's lots of stuff, lots of details. There's a predatory part to living in the street, and so you're powerless from every angle. So you leave one environment, escaping this environment just to go into something that is equally as horrific. But that's just what it is, right? You really can't escape. You can't escape what's going on in the world. It's just pervasive. So that feeling of powerlessness actually lived with me, and that's where I think, especially in males, well, I believe especially in males, that's where a lot of the rage comes from. It's that pushing back against this feeling of helplessness and powerlessness, and no other. We have no other. We believe we have no other way but to rage. Or what's the expression? Rage against the machine, like just to violently lash out. And though I've never been violent physically, that doesn't mean I haven't entertained the idea, inside my mind. And to suicidal ideation, to wonder like what is the point, and then I used to set a game in 90 days. If things don't get better, I'm out of here. So I'd give myself a buffer of 90 days. And what's interesting, every client I talk to, our second conversation is around, have you ever thought about taking your own life? And almost 99% of the time, it's always been on the table. And I bring it up mainly because I remember being went to counseling years ago, and the very first thing they said, which is what pushed me out of counseling, they said, before we start this conversation, if you have any discussion around hurting yourself or hurting somebody else, we have to let somebody know. And I realized that, okay, yeah, well,
You've just taken my power away.
it doesn't,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I was just so, okay, so
Let me refrain. The sacredness of this, my safety.
they took it away. So I could not be vulnerable here.
Yeah.
Right. And I kind of joke about it now a little bit, said, well, so what I was going to say, I was going to kill him and then drive off a cliff. And, so there's no, where else am I supposed to go? But you told me that your fear of litigation is more important than my sacredness being here, trying to expose my vulnerability. So I'm not important, but you being sued is super important. Now now I'm taking this in the context of the way I viewed it. That may not be the reason, but that's what it felt to me, that I am not important. You're just covering your own ass legally.
Well, and this is the whole concept of hierarchy.
Right.
There's so many levels of hierarchy, and this is the world that we're in. And I love that I'm having this conversation with you. As a male, and it's a masculine dominated um, system, which
Right.
is we all can see is imploding because it's based on externally somebody
Right.
telling you what to do that makes them feel comfortable. Case in point, a
Yeah.
therapist wants to feel more comfortable because he or she doesn't want to get sued or lose their license. So they put you in a box and say, you can only play in this box, but you want to play in this box.
Right.
And so it all comes back to when you're 28 and you're having this moment in Portugal because you finally got to play in your box, which was limitless. That's where you get the ability to be, do, have anything and everything, because you're finally able to create from your pleasure and your joy. And I'd love to hear, what does pleasure mean to you? What does joy mean to you? And I'm going to use the same example then and now.
Okay. Well, pleasure and joy seeking was was external. It was either finding a partner for for sexual pleasure, um, and that was a big part in Banff, Alberta. That was just it was just terrible because it was such a transient place. And but everybody was in that mindset, so it seemed okay, right? Just moments of pleasure, moments of distraction, and then drugs and alcohol, of course, also helped with that process because. But pleasure and joy was something that you sought out as a remedy to desolation, to
Mm.
emotional desolation, because there was nothing else there, and you didn't want to look into the abyss. And so the only way to avoid that is to avoid that to whatever means possible. And so moments of intimacy, what seemed to be intimacy, moments of uh, you know, I think that's why cocaine was so pervasive, because cocaine just rewards you. Cocaine is the same, it lights up the same parts in your brain of accomplishment. So if I accomplish something from working really hard for it, I get the same reward center as I would if I did a few lines of cocaine. It's the same thing, which is why it's so addictive.
Yeah.
Because we're designed to work hard to accomplish things, but we're designed to do the work, right? But pleasure now, what's so fascinating. I push back against internet memes. I talk about, you're just here to be happy, just follow your bliss and going, yeah, kind of, but I have fragments of happiness and I have tremendous amount of moments in time where I'm in deep introspection and deep thought, working through a process, trying to figure something out. And I wouldn't say I'm happy, but but I think we're wired for struggle. I think we're wired for I think we're way tougher than we even realize. And if we're given the right sense of purpose, we can withstand anything. Like we can go through anything. And having a profound sense of purpose, I'm willing to kind of go into the valley of death, as it were, go into the struggle and stay there long enough until until I find the answer I'm looking for. And when I come up the other side, and when I interact with somebody and I see the light in their eyes and I found the key, let's say I found the key for them, or I helped them find that way through. I was willing to go into that dark place first, and then I invited them in because now they're confident in what I'm able to guide them through, and we both walk into the light together. To me, watching somebody take their own life back, and it's not that I did it. It's not like I saved their life. It's not like but I had the courage to go into the darkness, to share the dark space with them, walk through it with them hand in hand, not telling them what to do, not judging them, just being a source of courage for them, and kind of helping them guide one step at a time. But when they find that, oh, I mean,
It's
because
power. That's power.
when you look around, it's heartbreaking to see. It's heartbreaking to see how much people struggle and struggle struggle without a sense of purpose. Struggle is it's just life, but struggle without a sense of purpose, a sense of a profound destiny, just to struggle for no other reason because that's just it. That's what your life is, just a struggle with no end point. It's just, I mean, that's kind of like that's your own version of hell on earth. But the struggle with a profound sense of purpose, I'm not worried about being happy. I'm not worried about that's not even. I'm not concerned about me. And if I could share something, if quite a few months ago, I did a ceremonial tea meditation, which basically meant it was psilocybin, and I
How
felt
many
the
grams did you do? The last
uh,
one I did was 4.
yeah, it was called a hero's dose.
Yeah.
And and
On the ride.
but what was so profound, because I spent 2 weeks preparing for it, and I was thinking very clearly. I had the sense that I was separate from the world. Like I could go and I could help you fix a frozen shoulder. I could help you do this physical thing. I could help you sort something out psychologically or spiritually. But I was never allowed to be in that world. I could always orchestrate things from the outside. Like I always felt a bit disconnected. And so down this 6-hour journey, um, and what came out of it was something so simple and so profound, was that said, the secret to life, the secret to a profound life is humility. And humility, more importantly, is that the message that came through, that you must subordinate yourself to natural and spiritual laws. And when you are humble enough to accept that as a truth, and to explore that, it's like crawling through this little tiny keyhole that you barely fit through, and all your effort is just to get through it. But once you pop to the other side, there's freedom, like absolute freedom, because those laws are immutable. And instead of actually spending a lifetime fighting them, why don't you spend a lifetime exploring them? And the greater the exploration, the greater the freedom. The greater the exploration, the greater the freedom. And and that resistance to us is just perhaps wanting to bring too much stuff through the keyhole that just won't fit. We got to leave it behind.
Yeah, I'm gonna take that and put that in a commercial for this video. It's letting go of the control, the mind control, and it's bringing that integration, that connection to the body, because this is spirit. I mean, whatever you believe in, God, universe, source, divine, it doesn't matter what you believe in. It's bigger than you, because you're just a vessel to enjoy the journey. You're not here to work your butt off to your 65 and then retire. Um, it's presence. And I think what I kept hearing the whole time you were talking is you learned how to stop skimming the surface and bring depth and presence and enrichment to all of your experiences, the painful ones and the pleasurable ones. That's where you get the joy in the presence, because then you get to appreciate everything and you don't take anything for granted. And that's the connections with external things, the connection with yourself. And you're right, there's no end to exploring that. Like that's the, I don't even have a word for it. That's like the gift of the journey, because it's like you're on a different conveyor belt then. You're not on autopilot. You're like, okay, where are we gonna go now? This is cool. This is cool.
Well, and I can't imagine living in this world in particular without without anything to orientate to that's bigger than yourself. If you have nothing to orientate beyond yourself, I just can't see how you'll get through a day.
And a lot of people don't know how to do that. And that's why they're grasping and struggling, and they're stressed, and their anxiety and their fear, because they're looking for that leadership. Because unfortunately, our world hasn't set us up to learn how to lead. We've lost that. And it's men like you, and it's other balanced individuals that have gone through these massive journeys all the way back full circle, and realizing everything you need is here. Declutter, get rid of the noise, listen to your truth. Your truth is going to guide you forward. And when you start following that in confidence and in belief, people feel that and they want to tap into what you have, because it's safe, because they feel, yeah, there's fear, but you're moving through it anyway. And there's power in the courage to move through your fear and anchor that safety. And you know what? I got it. Let's go. I got you. I've been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I got you.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of the, what are we doing? Because in the unknown, that void, that abyss where you don't have a map and you're blindfolded in a dark room, that's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
That's where the magic is. That's where like all the richness and all the gifts lie. And that's your power.
Well, and now more so than any other time in history, because we spent the last 3 years just crushing the hope out of people, right? Crushing the resolve out of people. And and the fact that we don't have more conversations, profound conversations about mental health, and we don't, and spiritual loss that has occurred the last 3 years. It's appalling because it's so obvious that that would be, you know, aside from the loss of life that occurred over the last 3 years, which is unfortunate, but more unfortunate is the fact that everybody, those who survived physically, are not surviving mentally or spiritually.
And that is, I mean, this is why I've started this
Right,
speaker series, Permission for Pleasure, because I mean, it's connected to my whole mission, which is mind, body, soul wellness.
right,
'Cause me, like you, I went on my version of a similar journey where I felt like I was putting a band-aid on everything and I had to
right.
get under the covers. And I realized that I wasn't moving all the gunk inside of me because I was externally medicating and I was disconnected. And it's that disconnect because we're afraid we don't know how to connect and bringing that connection, mind, body into you. That is really what's going to help alleviate this massive mental um, problem that our society is facing right now and giving people the tools and the techniques to do that. So what are a couple of nuggets of wisdom that you can share to pay for that can get, let's maybe men in particular can get them going and course correct and really bring that connection back into their spirit and their inner wisdom.
Well, you know what? It was a beautiful story, and this is a very ancient story that I think it's research. I think Joseph Campbell had written about it, and it's called the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And the hero's journey, it, it's so profound. I mean, it applies to both men and women, but typically, archetypically, it's a male's story. It's a knight in shining armor, right? As the story goes. But what's so powerful, if when I walk a man or a young man through the story, and it typically, every story starts the same way. A young man leaves his home to seek his fame and fortune. A young knight is trying to win his castle, and at some point in time in the story, they always encounter a fire-breathing dragon of some sort, right? And but and a fire-breathing dragon, and always has, for whatever reason, we never understood this until now. At least I didn't. A fair young maiden that's tied to a post or a pillar, right, next to the dragon, and behind the dragon is the coveted. It's the cave full of treasures. And we all seem to accept the storyline like it's self-evident, and yet we don't understand what it means. But this story is so ancient. Like, these stories are so archetypical. They're built into our DNA because our ancestors have been talking about these things forever. Um, so what was interesting is that, well, when you come up to the dragon, of course, the dragon, is slightly intimidating, but the dragon or your reaction to the dragon represents your vagus nerve, right? It's your stress circuit. So you're going to run away, you're going to numb out, or you're going to fight, right? So that's our vagus nerve. That's our fight, flight, or numb. So our ancestors knew that, right? Very clever people, right? For a bunch of superstitious people that we cast them off, superstitious and archaic. Oh, they were so wise. So if you run away, that obviously makes the dragon will just become bigger because you become smaller, right? You made yourself smaller by being a coward and running away. But it's a dragon, so I get it. It's understandable. If you in these stories about knights and dragons, if a dragon looks you in the eye, if he capture your gaze, you become numb, and you can't move, you can't speak, so he'll just devour you. So if you're numb out, you get devoured by the dragon, right? So that's not a good plan either. But so what's left? You can kill the dragon, you can fight the dragon, but why would you fight a dragon? It's a giant thing covered with armor type scales, breathes fire, big claws. It weighs you by about 7,000 pounds. Why would you fight a dragon? Like, what would compel you? The fine young maiden. And it wasn't about, you know, this knight wanting to show off for a beautiful girl. The maiden represented his virtue. You would only stand up and fight what needs to be fought against if your character and virtue were worth fighting for. And so she represented virtue, right? Because she's dressed in white, typically in the story. So she represented purity of mind, purity of heart, virtue, and character.
Mm.
And so the knight, he would only fight the dragon. He'd only fight his deepest fears if it was in his character to do so. And in doing so, now if he died fighting the dragon, well, he died a hero. But if he actually succeeded in killing the dragon, what is all the treasures? What's all the treasure for? Well, the treasure actually represents the value he becomes to his community. He takes all this treasure back and disperses it amongst the members of his community. And so he becomes this valuable asset. Not only did he rise in character, rise in courage, but the value he represents to his community becomes greater. And as a man, for example, and not exclusively, but just for the sake of this conversation, if a man is willing to check in with his character, check in with his virtue, and make a declaration, and actually put a large portion of his effort in deciding what is the character of the man that I want to be. What does that look like? What does that feel like? And the fact that you can be in the face of something that feels like is going to overwhelm you, and in fact even devour you, knees knocking, right? Your armor clanging away because you're shaking inside, but still willing to fight the dragon because it's in your character to do so. And you become so much more valuable to the world around you. And I think having men and women being willing to define their character, be very specific about who they're being in the world, and then and be willing to lean into these devouring serpents that show up in our life again and again, and to continue to develop the character, knowing that on the other side of that, there's something beautiful, some beautiful treasure that we're going to bring back to our village. And it's our knowledge, our stories, we're blazing the path for other people to believe that it's possible. She did it, he did it, maybe I can do it too. And I think these archetypical stories are so important to remember and bring back forward, because I live my life off that story. And there's lots of times where my armor's clanging and I'm just not, I'm not 100% certain I'm going to pull this thing off, but it's in my character to lean into the fear anyhow. As ugly and as terrifying as it might be, it's just in my character. I have to. It's one of the options. And when you define it as character being the one thing that you have to pay attention to, it just solidifies everything, because it doesn't make it complicated. It's either in your character to be this person or it's not. No excuses. Stand up and fight the dragon.
Yeah. And it's so funny, because listening to that story as a woman, what I am hearing totally with character and virtue, I'm equally hearing connecting into our feminine intuition and our feeling and our
Yes.
connection, the feminine within all of us, because it's been suppressed and oppressed and numbed and quieted. And that mind body connection,
Right.
and it's beautiful. I love it. So I know you work with men and women. We've talked a lot about kind of your experience as a man and talking to men, but I know you serve a lot of women. So what type of advice would you like to give? What's like a golden nuggets, a word, a phrase? What would you like to leave to pay forward with those that are listening today? Other than this amazing story you just shared, is there one word that you would like to leave everybody with?
Um, it's simplicity.
Yeah.
It's not that this path is easy, but it's not complicated either. If we were, I always say in my work that all misery exists in the contrast between knowing better and doing better. And we wouldn't feel bad about anything if we didn't know the difference, right? So because of that contrast there, we know differently. We have a PhD in knowing better, but we rarely do better. And it's the character that bridges that gap. And both men and women have tremendous amount of power, a tremendous amount of longing to want to contribute. But the simplicity of it is that your story is like everybody else's story. It's a story of challenge and triumph. It's a story of betrayal, right? It's a story of courage. It's just the story. There's a reason why these stories exist, because it's the human story. And we are built for it. We are built for this journey. We are so powerful, and you just can't let anybody convince you that that's not what you're designed to do, because it's built into our DNA.
And I love that you say simplicity, because our mind has the desire to overcomplicate and do so much when your soul just wants you to be.
Right.
and to be in the quickest, simplest, most effective and efficient way possible, because that's how you enjoy your life.
Yeah.
Like bringing it down to simplicity. Just don't overcomplicate anything.
Yeah.
Easier said than done for sure. I love this. Thank you. This has been a really amazing conversation. I love these.
Uh-huh.
Ah, so if you would do it all over, would you do anything different?
I might, there's a few things I might not repeat, but it's, but, a decision I made a bunch of years ago was that I had to come to grips with the fact that we're limited, as far as I know. We have a limited amount of time on Earth. And I had to acknowledge the fact that, yeah, I have a finite amount of time. And so there's, lots of belief in the afterlife, and that might be true. But nobody's ever come back and said, hey, by the way, it's amazing, right? So we haven't had that conversation yet. So I kind of forestalled the idea of an life ever after, because there's a life here right now that I need to contend with. And I thought about, my goal is to live to 107. That's my objective. And in the last weeks of my life, I want to be able to look back over the course of my life and look at a tremendous adventure that I just went on. Not a life that, man, it was so great. I mean, I left all this real estate to my kids, and and I traveled all these different places, and going, no, I'm gonna show up as an old an old warrior with armor that just dented all to hell, and my sword has got chips out of it from hacking and swinging at. And I just want to know that I lived a formidable life, and and I had a life that was well spent, and I'd be willing to close my eyes at the end of my day, knowing that was the life that I lived.
As you're saying that, I'm looking at the notes that I wrote. These are my notes. And I have the word empty and hollow with an arrow pointing to an empty box. And you just wanted to know that you filled up your box with all the stuff you wanted to experience.
Yeah.
You could just, yeah, this was cool. This was good. I love it. I loved our conversation. And so is there any, where can people connect with you? Is there anything that you'd like to share as a way to connect into your world as part of our speaker series?
Yeah, well, it's I run the overarching program that I run is called the I Am Project. So it's theiamproject.com. And the I Am Project represents both the physical development and the spiritual development of who we are. So through there, of course, you can connect me through there, through the contact information on the site. And but it's but come with your, if you decide to reach out, come with your questions, right? So yes, I have, I'm in business like everyone else, but the business part really is very much secondary to what I do. But come with your questions, and come with your fears. I want to hear what's plaguing you, and and come with some humility, and knowing that whatever you say will be safe.
Mm.
I have so many incredible conversations with people, and and not only do I get you, but I got you, right? It's
Love that.
and it doesn't have to, the journey doesn't have to start with me, but I have the resource in the background to probably provide you with a few guideposts, and perhaps you should go over here, and here's a good place to start. If that's what you're struggling with, you don't have to start with me as far as a program, but you can start with me as a conversation, and I'll direct you to honestly where you need to be.
I think that is so powerful, especially with the amount of change that's happening in our world. And a lot of people are really searching for stability,
Right.
foundational, balanced stability, because we know where we were isn't where we want to be or go.
Right.
And I love that you bring a centered, grounded, anchored, safe stability to then create your other people's world upon. And that is such a beautiful gift, because lots of people aren't born with that, and that's okay. And those that learn how to do it, it's like a 200-year-old, 1,000 massive tree in a storm that isn't going anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's really, really powerful. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, like I said, at the end of the day, it's just, we talked about this in the very beginning of our conversation, with the physical body, if there is no core strength, there is no posture, there is no alignment physically. And if you do not start there first, and you do not reconcile your posture, right, your physical posture, your core strength, you don't define it. And 80% of your work on the physical front is all with that. It's all with posture and alignment and core strength. That's 80% of the success in all physical endeavors. And the same thing goes with your spiritual endeavors. It's not the work; it's who you are. It's the intention of what kind of person do I want to grow into or bring forward. And 80% of the work's on your character. The path can become self-evident.
Mm.
The path becomes very self-evident of what you should be doing, but is it in your character to do so? So if 80% of your focus is continuously realigning back to your character, to me, it speaks of the necessity of that to be the most important defining thing in your life is your character. And if you can define that, then the path unfolds for you beautifully, quite often without you even actually laying it out. But your character will lead you forward. The path will unfold as it should.
And that's really the simple plan.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Which is very life-changing.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. This
You're
is
welcome.
amazing. I am looking forward to having you back into our world at any time you like. And it was lovely to connect. And for those watching, thank you. And it was so lovely to have you share this space with us today. And have a great day. Bye.